So,
Good afternoon and welcome to the third public lecture of our visiting professor, Dr. Hanna Teras of the Tampere University of Applied Sciences in Finland. Our dear colleagues, welcome and good afternoon to everyone. This training webinar is brought to you by the Mindanao State University, Iligan Institute of Technology College of Education through the Department of Technology Teacher Education in collaboration with Better Universities and Knowledge for All project, co-funded by the Erasmus Plus of the European Union. We would like to welcome all of you, training participants, along with all the faculty and teaching staff of the college. We are very fortunate to have with us a very esteemed expert whom we already know since our first lecture since last January. Before we formally start, I would like to present a few reminders for our training this afternoon. First, the link for today's attendance will be provided in the Google Meet chat and the YouTube Live comment section. Second, for those of us present in the Google Meet, make sure that you're in a place with no distractions and have your microphones muted unless called upon. Third, to minimize data traffic and consumption, we request you turn off your videos unless requested. Fourth, during the lecture, we request that our Google Meet participants refrain from chatting questions and comments. Instead, please reserve them for the forum that will follow right after the lecture. Finally, to get your certificate of attendance for today's session, please accomplish the evaluation link shortly before the end of the session. At this point, I know that everyone here is ready to learn more, especially that we will be talking about monitoring the effectiveness of our learning designs and practices. May I request everyone to stand for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem and for a short prayer.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa dikit mo'y buhay. Lupang binirang, kuyak ka ng magiting, sa manluluping, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mo bagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang ituwid at karoon niya kailan pang ay mag-iindig. Lumalang araw ng waragit pansin ka, buhay ay langit sa piling mo. Ang hinigaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Once again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third public lecture of our visiting professor, Dr. Hannah Terrace. As a form of a review, our first session was conducted last January 12, and Dr. Hannah talked about how we can engage our students in an online learning environment. The next session of Dr. Hannah was last February 4, where Dr. Hannah expounded on the discussion of authentic e-learning, and she shared her experience of implementing that. Today, Dr. Hannah will be sharing about how do we know if our learning designs actually works. Today's session will cover how we can use action research to both evaluate our practice and inform our decisions. As a short introduction to our speaker, for those of you who just joined in this webinar session, Dr. Hannah Terrace is a principal lecturer on digital learning environments in the School of Professional Teacher Education at the Tampere University of Applied Sciences. Her research interests include authentic online learning for professional learning, emerging interactive technologies in education, teacher education, and teachers' professional development. Currently, Dr. Terrace is a project lead in a Finnish Education Ministry funded project, Learning Analytics for Universities of Applied Sciences, which involves a good number of university partners in Finland. She is also a founding member of the Critical Applied Research of Digitalization in Education Research Group. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, help me welcome our visiting professor, Dr. Hannah Terrace.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and just good morning or afternoon, afternoon for you, late morning for myself. It's a great privilege for me to be sharing this time with you again, and I look forward to sharing some thoughts about using action research for monitoring the and evaluating the quality of our learning designs. As many of you probably have been attending the earlier sessions as well, so these sort of build on each other. So first we talked about engaging learners and effective learning designs, and now we move on to discuss how we can evaluate whether the learning design that we have come up with is successful or if it needs any more tweaking. So can I start sharing my presentation?
Yes, Dr. Hannah.
Okay, let's see how this works. There we go. Now I hope you can see a slide, the title slide for the presentation.
Yes, Dr. Hannah, we can see the slides.
Okay. So the topic for today is using action research. And I've added here for professional development because I believe in lifelong professional development for academics and educators. I believe that we share the passion of developing our practice and becoming ever more effective in what we do, so that our students will have so that our teaching will be as beneficial for the student as possible. So here I don't refer to professional development as a course or a program or anything like that, but more as a process that we as education professionals and academics are engaged in. And action research is a wonderful tool for doing that, for improving our practice, whatever it is that we do. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what action research is and how we can use it, and also give some examples of how in what kinds of situations I have used action research myself. So let's begin with a definition. When I was preparing this presentation, I came up with so many definitions of what how different scholars have defined what action research is. But I like this one from McCutcheon and Young. From this is already from 1990. They say that action research is systemic inquiry that is collective, collaborative, self-reflective, critical, and is undertaken by participants in the inquiry. So some keywords here are that it's about inquiry, but it's also systemic. Systemic in that there is a process, and there is that we are not going by a hunch feeling, but we are systemic in collecting data about how our practice is working, and we follow a scholarly process in all this. It is also collaborative, as we come to notice when we move on in this presentation. Reflection is a very strong component in action research. Critical thinking as well. And what is really important is that it's research that the participants themselves are involved in. So it's not something that an outside person, a researcher comes and does the research, but we practitioners are practitioner researchers as we engage in action research. The most important goal of action research is to achieve change. It is to, we're thinking about a typical situation where action research would be done, excuse me, is that we are developing our practice. So we are hoping to change something to achieve better results, and we use research to achieve this change, to see if it works, to make it more impactful. And for this reason, action research is very widely embraced in especially in education, as a form of professional development or a tool in professional development. Action research was first, the theory was first formulated, or many researchers accredit the formulation of action research theory to this person who is in the picture. This is psychologist Kurt Lewin, who was active in the earlier half of the 20th century, and he wanted to see a better combination of research and action, so that research would not only be to gain more knowledge, but also to improve practice. And in action research, the most important goal is to improve practice. But I like this quote from him, the last line here. He wrote somewhere that there is no research without action, and there's no action without research. Or this is what he was hoping to see, that research would lead to action, and no action would be taken if there was no evidence sort of to guide the decisions. So it's a very close combination of researching and acting upon the research results. after Kurt Lewin, many others have developed this further, and also before him there were already similar ideas, but he has been acknowledged as the first person to actually use the term action research and define what it might mean. So here is some characteristics of action research in a nutshell. So it is practical research, applied in that sense, and it's always located in a particular setting. So this is important that it's action research takes place in the same environment where the action takes place. So if a teacher does action research, then it's the classroom and the course or the immediate surrounding where the teacher operates is where the research is also located. And the desired result is to achieve beneficial change to those people who will be affected by that research. In our case, that would be our students. It would be, well, probably primarily our students, ourselves, our colleagues, our department, our university, so our own social context. It has very strong links with the idea of reflective practice, which has been researched by Donald Schoen. And I will talk a little bit more about that as we move on. Now, I myself have used action research in my own teaching, and as a program leader, I have also encouraged and, well, required participants to my courses to also undertake action research. And I have realized that one of the challenges, especially in the academia, such as ourselves, a challenge is to differentiate between, I say, actual research. Well, but what I mean is research in a traditional sense, traditional meaning of the word. So many of us who work in universities, we are by default, we are involved in both teaching and we're involved in research. So we are familiar with the idea of research. And for us, it's sometimes difficult to make a distinction between the research that we do as university lecturers or university professors and action research. Because when we talk about research, we are so we have an understanding of how research should be objective and how we should collect all this data, and we have an idea of what kind of research is publishable and is it good research in that sense. So our problem sometimes is that we set the bar way too high for action research when we get a little bit confused, like, oh, this is not, is this rigorous enough? And especially I've noticed that for those of us academics who are very familiar with quantitative research, with large data sets and statistical analysis, we might sometimes struggle with action research because we think like, oh, this is not a big enough data set, or this is not rigorous enough. But this is not, we shouldn't be thinking like this, because the action research is meant to improve practice rather than produce generalizations or general rules about how or theories, or it's not to validate or test a theory or hypothesis necessarily. It's much more specific, and it's necessarily is inherently contextual. So here we don't want to take a step outside, but we want to be involved. We don't want to look at the situation from afar, but we want to be a part of it. And this sometimes, for school teachers, this is much easier. For university teachers, this is sometimes difficult because we have fixed ideas of what research should be like. So here we want to be specific, we want to be contextual, because it's this particular context, it's this learning design, it's this class, it's this course or program that I want to improve. So this is important for us to keep in mind. And as Lewin actually said, research, as useful as it is, in the sense that it might be able to produce general laws, it may also fail to grasp the particularity of specific situations. So with action research, we are concerned with a specific situation, with something that is very particular and specific. And we need to keep in mind that what we are doing is we are developing practice. We are developing our learning designs, we're developing our teaching methods, we are developing our assessment methods, whatever it is that that is the sort of the research target in our action research. So that's the goal. So we want to understand practice in the context of practice. For those university researchers who are more familiar with qualitative research tradition, especially those who do narrative research or phenomenology or something like that, it might be a little bit easier because they are they already embrace the idea of being involved rather than being objective and sort of outside the situation. I don't know what your research tradition is, or whether you are in a teaching and research role or teaching focused or research focused, but I wanted to bring this up because I've noticed that this is sometimes a struggle for some academics. So here's one more slide about the general characteristics and requirements of action research. As I said, there are many different approaches, and there are theories of action research that differ slightly, but all of them include these three aspects. So action research projects always aim at improving practice, and there is always a process that sort of proceeds in cycles, where we plan, we act, we observe, and we reflect. And I'm getting deeper into that cycle in my next slide. So that's always a part of action research as well. And thirdly, it's always the projects always involve those who are responsible for the practice that is being studied and improved. So it's practitioner research. Oh, I mentioned that action research proceeds in cycles, and for the next part of this lecture, we are going to take a closer look at what this cycle is like and what happens at different stages of the cycle. The cycle starts, or it can actually start at any point because it is a cycle. It could be that you first reflect on something that is going on in your course or is going on with your students, and when you reflect, you notice that there is something that you want to improve. But let's start from the top of this cycle, and that's the planning. That's sort of like the first step of action research. So the planning stage is where you identify the problem. This is where everything starts. We need to have an idea of what the problem is, do sort of a diagnosis on our practice, and see what is it that we want to improve, what is the situation, is there a problem, is there a challenge, is there something that you are interested in developing. And when you know what it is, you plan an intervention or plan some sort of action. So in practice, this could be you are, well, I'm going to use examples from the, some of you might remember from my previous lecture, I mentioned that that we did this postgraduate certificate program for university teachers in the United Arab Emirates. So I'm going to use examples from that program, what the university teachers there did. So we had, they were studying the use of educational technology, integrating educational technology in their teaching. And for many, the problem, or the research question would then be, how can this particular technology be used for this and this purpose? Or would this technology be helpful for this and this purpose? Or this could be that you are that you need to maybe start teaching online, something that you always were teaching face to face in the classroom. Now suddenly, because of the pandemic, we need to bring this online. So the question could be, how can I engage my students in an online or blended modality? Or how can I improve my assessment, or anything like that? And then the next step would be to put the intervention that you planned into action. Try it out, test it, see how it goes. Maybe it could be something like, okay, I will use the ABC model for learning, for changing my learning design. And then the action would be doing that. I could use it and change the learning design, or change the assessment, or make some intervention, and try it out. See how it goes. And for most most of us would be familiar with these first two steps. How often does it happen to us that we see maybe this is not working in my teaching, maybe I should, do I need 3 assessment tasks? Maybe I could do 2 assessment tasks and just make them a little bit different. We do this all the time. We do this, we think about how our teaching could be improved, and then we act, we try something out. This is what we do sort of automatically even. But then comes the action research extra step, which is to actually collect evaluation data, to actually measure the outcome. So you collect data to see how this, whether this intervention was working or not. And then we move to the next step, which is to observe. And in this step, you analyze and interpret the evaluation data that you collected and make conclusions based on your findings. So this is where it starts to look very much like any research. And the next step after that would be to reflect on it. Review what you have just found. Is there anything that shows you that some new adjustments need to be made? Or was everything good? Or maybe you need to change something else. Maybe part of it was working well, but then there was this other part which was not so successful. Maybe some the students were, like, some students were doing really well, but then new problems came up. Anything can happen. so in this step, you reflect on what you just experienced, what you just observed. And then based on your reflection, make a new plan. So it is a cycle. It doesn't stop there, but very often you need to do a second round or a third round, and it's an iterative process. So I think this cycle illustrates really nicely how this is a combination of research methodology and reflective practice. So the way my students did this, the ones in the United Arab Emirates, they actually they took the technology or the change in the learning design and they implemented in their own course, and then they collected data, made observations, reflected on their findings, and many actually proceeded to send research papers to conferences or make a poster to a teaching and learning conference or something like that. So it actually became very it was not a requirement, but they got so excited about the action research methodology that they realized that what they are doing is actually really important, and it might be interesting also from other people to find out what they were learning. So this is the cycle. This is how it proceeds, and the starting point, the most important thing, is to identify the problem. So here is a really nice citation from Reyes. He did action research in the area of music education. And Reyes said that most research done in music education fails to have any impact simply because the problems selected are not seen as problems by those who presumably would benefit from the solution. So this just illustrates that sometimes academic research is quite detached from practice. And here it's really important for us who do action research to come up with a problem that is a real problem, that we identify as a problem, that is a real challenge in our practice. So it's not an abstract thing, but it's something that you really want to improve in your own practice. It has to be quite concrete. So in the next few slides, we are going to take a closer look at these 4 stages that were illustrated in the cycle. Starting with the plan, action research plan. And this is actually a really important part of action research, because if we don't get this right, it will be very difficult for us to measure whether the learning design or whatever it was that we were changing, whether it was effective or not. So it's hard for us to evaluate that if we don't have a good action research plan where we have a research problem that is clearly defined. So it has to be a question that can be answered. So we need to start by defining the research problem. What is the target group? What is the problem that we are trying to tackle? And it's a good idea to actually write this down in the form of a question. So it's good to formulate the research problem as a research question, something that you can put a question mark to. How or what or when, or it has to have a question in it. But this is actually quite important. So because if we let me give you an example. If we use something vague as, well, I'm just going to try out whether, I'm just going to try out how I can use these technologies here, then it doesn't really have an answer. It's hard to answer a question like that. So it's good to take a little bit of time and really define the problem clearly. Maybe talk with colleagues and try to come up with a real question. Once this is done, we assess the situation. What do we already know about this? What is my previous experience with this? Maybe search some literature to identify if there are some solutions, if there are some suggestions. For example, if your problem is that your students are dropping out or they are not, maybe I give you a very concrete example. How to engage students in a discussion forum. This is a concrete problem. So what is my previous experience about discussion forums and using them with students? Maybe find out if there is literature about, if there is already some research about engaging students in discussion forums. Or maybe there is a learning design model that you can use so that you can better integrate the discussion forum into or align it with the course structure and course learning outcomes. Search literature and maybe talk with colleagues to get an idea of a situation and possible solutions that you might want to try out. After that, we make an action plan. So what is the technique that we want to test? How can we implement it? And also, what results do we expect? What do we hope will happen? It's sort of like a hypothesis. So if the students were never active in a discussion forum and now you want to try out a different way of using discussion forums, maybe use them as a part of a group work for authentic task. How would you implement it? What do you expect that might happen? And then finally, we make an evaluation plan. How are we going to gather and analyze data? This is also something that we need to plan ahead. How are we going to do this? What will be the best way of collecting and analyzing data? How will we know if this was working or not? So this is the plan step, the first step. Sometimes it's difficult to come up with the relevant question. So in those cases, it might be helpful to think about the dilemmas that we're currently struggling with in our courses, or maybe something that we are particularly excited about. Maybe we have heard about a new idea that we would like to try out, or are curious about something. So those are maybe brainstorm with a colleague, and most likely the action research problem will emerge from these questions. Here are some question examples. Maybe we want to create a more engaging learning environment. What kind of task would be authentic and motivating for my students? What would be a good technology for this purpose? Would a different form of assessment be better for this course? How can I get my students to collaborate and work together? These are questions that we all probably struggle with. Then we move on to our action step. So here I've broken this down in a more concrete way. So we want to change something in our course in attempt to find an answer to the question that we just posed. We might test a new task design, try a new technology, add an element of authentic learning, change something. Maybe one of my colleagues did this. She used to have longer lectures, but she changed it to a shorter video and started using the flipped classroom model, and added more discussion and collaboration to her course. And she got really, really good results with that. So she was doing this. And my tip would be that you don't need to change everything at once. If you change the course completely and altogether, it might be difficult to assess which of the changes was good and which was not. And it's good to remember that this action research goes on in cycles, so we can add on. We don't need to turn everything around and make everything completely different from what it was before. It can be a smaller change as well. Then we move on to observe. And here I think it's important to notice that action research in itself is not a methodology. It can be used, or you can use different methodologies within the action research framework. So what this means is that you can collect and analyze data in various ways. There's no one right way of doing this. It depends entirely on what the problem is and what the context is. But here are some ideas for data collection. We might use questionnaires for students, student reflections such as learning journals or blogs if they're writing blogs, or discussion forum posts. We might do interviews, focus groups, feedback surveys. We might observe LMS data such as student participation activity, submission quantity, quality, activity in the LMS, etc. And we might use journaling, also our own journaling. And of course, it depends on how many students you have, or what the question is. Just as in any research, it's the research question that sort of dictates what methodology is most appropriate. And I would like to emphasize here that as action research is a practitioner based way of doing research, we do not need to detach ourselves from the process. We are also data sources. We are also important components in the context, in the social context where this research takes place. So we also are important data sources ourselves. And I would actually encourage you to keep a research journal as you go. And in the journal, you can record any insights, any anecdotes, any observations as they occur, because they might be very useful later on. Also, if you are doing online lessons and you are using if this is the focus of your action research, if you are doing online lessons, you might record the sessions and review the sessions for any observations afterwards. And it's also a good idea to periodically reflect, either in writing or in audio or video, whatever is natural for you, on what is happening in your course. This is what Donald Schoen would call reflection in action, meaning reflecting as you go. And then later on, when you combine all this and data that you collected from your course, you get a rich source of information that you can base your observations and your conclusions on. So don't be afraid to get involved. As for methodology, either qualitative or quantitative, you can use action research can be done with both approaches. This is just to remind us that it depends on our research question, which one we want to choose. As with qualitative research, we aim at a deeper understanding of a phenomena that maybe cannot be measured in a meaningful way, whereas quantitative methods aim at measuring and generalizing and testing and confirming theories. Now, of course, if you have a small course, it doesn't make sense to aim at generalizing, because if it's a very small, say you have a small postgraduate course that only has like 20 students in it, or you or or you are supervising master students or something like that, and you don't have very many, then it probably wouldn't make a lot of sense to go quantitative, because quantitative requires large numbers of participants in order to make any significant difference. Now the question is, if you whether in your situation you want to understand the reasons, the motivations and experience of your students, or do you need a statistical picture of what's happening in your course? Or you can combine, of course, and go mixed method. And then we move to the reflection part of the cycle. In this step, we reflect on what did we learn? What do the results tell us? Maybe there are new questions, need for further improvement, defining next steps. Is this, are we going to do this again, or was this a failure, or what did we learn from this? It's never a failure. You always learn something. That was a poor choice of words, but whether you want to continue to develop or whether you are happy with your results, that's what you decide in the reflection stage. And this is where we get the connection to Schoen's theory of reflection. And as we have now talked about this cycle of action research, we see that it's a very reflective cycle. So there's reflection in action and reflection on action. So we reflect as we go, we reflect as something is happening. This is what I referred to when I encourage you to maybe write a journal or a memo on what's happening as it's still going on. And then we also reflect on action, so afterwards, when it's over, to see if something needs to be changed. Another model that this has very much similarities with is the experiential learning cycle from Kolb. It's also a cycle, and as you look at this picture, you see that there's similarities, there's overlaps. So in the experiential learning cycle, we have an experience where we are experiencing something. We have reflective observation, where we review that experience. Abstract conceptualization, where we make conclusions and learn from the experience. And active experimentation, where we try out new solutions, we try out what we have learned. And I wanted to add this picture because I wanted to make this connection to emphasize that for us as practitioners, as university teachers and academics, action research is not only about improving our practice and improving something for our students, but it's also for ourselves. It's a form of experiential learning cycle. It's for us, it's a way of becoming better at what we do. It's a form of professional learning and professional development for us. So action research has so many benefits because it's also at the same time it's a way of systematically improving our practice to benefit our students, but it's also a form of experiential learning for ourselves, so that we become, we grow we grow professionally, we grow as people, we learn, we understand more. So that's why I wanted to make this connection to Kolb's experiential learning cycle. We normally, when we talk about this, when we talk about students, we want students to go through the experiential learning cycle, but we might as well benefit from it. Finally, I believe that action research is better done together. So we get better results when we're not doing this in isolation, but are involving colleagues in the process. So it is possible to do action research alone or with a colleague, but even if we are working alone on our own research problem, it's a good idea to involve colleagues in discussion. And if there is a group of colleagues who all do action research, it's a fantastic idea to book in time for sharing together, sharing your ideas and what you learned, and just brainstorm and bounce ideas together. So it's also a form of collegial sharing, and at its best, it can become a way of fostering a community of practice among colleagues at the university. And it's also a good idea to share our results, either in writing or in a presentation or in a video. It doesn't have to be an international conference, but it can be. But even just for colleagues or in a department meeting or a staff meeting to share results, it's very helpful. First of all, it helps you to crystallize what you have learned, but it's also very beneficial for the community, for colleagues. So it's a very good idea to work together. But it's also possible to share, to have a group of colleagues or a pair of colleagues work on the same action research problem and work as a team. I myself, especially when I was still, now I have been out of teaching for a couple of years because I've been in a very research intensive role, but during my teaching career, I've used this a lot. Actually, that's how I first got into research. I started doing action research on my own courses. I think the very first one that I did was about discussion forums and about engaging students in discussions. And I got so excited about it that it actually encouraged me to start doing more research. so it's good for motivation, because it helps you see your teaching in a new light and gives new tools. So I'm a big advocate of action research, because I myself benefited so much from it. Another one that I've done has been about the use of the authentic learning model. So in my last lecture, when we talked about authentic learning and I shared my research findings, so many of those we're actually action research taken a step further. So it was researching my own practice and developing my own practice. I have found action research a very helpful way of improving practice and learning more. And I hope that that in this time of pandemic, when we are really faced with challenges in changing our teaching and changing our courses, and we don't have a shortage of research problems. I think there is so much that we struggle with at the moment. And I believe, from experience, I believe that action research is a great way of tackling these major challenges and issues that we're facing at the moment. Also because it's a more rigorous way of improving practice. So we come up with tried and tested solutions and not just something that is based on a hunch. So I believe it will be very helpful in our universities at these times. So this was my presentation. I'll stop sharing now, and I think we might move towards the questions and answers.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr.
Discussion.
Hannah, for a very well-constructed presentation, very informative, very helpful. For me personally, since we are creating teams in the college right now, through the efforts of our dean, we have this project where identified faculties are to conduct action researches in our respective courses, and we're gonna do that as a team. So I think it makes sense that it would really be better if a group of action researchers are gonna discuss results and share insights every now and then. And I do it periodically. So that's very helpful, Dr. Hannah, for very helpful. The lecture is very helpful. And so this time around, we would like to open the floor for questions and answers. Any comments, clarification if you want to, perhaps Dr. Hannah to expound based on the lecture or something, some other concerns. All right, anyone from our Google Meet participants would like to throw the first question? Or you might want to share something, an experience, an attempt on doing action research that would, I think, also be beneficial for our discussion this afternoon. Mamani?
Hi, Hannah. Actually, yeah. Thank you very much for that presentation. Actually, I'm waiting for my colleagues to ask questions because Juniel have mentioned that I am trying to organize a team of action researcher. And your reflection a while ago that this is really new for university. We're used to do action research where we collect data, a quantitative research. Most of the research are quantitative, where we don't work more on qualitative research, but we're thinking about that. I guess they have no question right now, but they are thinking how to work on it because you have discussed about it's worth to know about in what way, because this is our second semester and we are improving our syllabus, so it is very timely to think about research question as we implement this second semester. And then how do we collect is how do we collect it? Maybe it would be more useful if we will listen to our students, uh, maybe collect journal, and then how it will improve our practice again for the next semester. But again, this is the way how we reframe our syllabus and our plan based on our practice last semester. Uh, for now, we don't have answers if we're doing it right or we still need to be improved. So I would like to ask my colleagues. I guess this is the time that we need to listen to our student, collect data, not only to our student, but also to ourselves. Let's keep our journal and what happened in our synchronous discussion and what happened in our asynchronous discussion, and then reflect what happened. And then let's go back to our journal, and then let's think about what's our next step. How do we improve ourselves? So in this case, since we have wrote our journal and we have listened to our students, therefore our next step is we have an informed decision on what will be our next steps. So for all of us, for our colleague here, although we are not used to this, but for me, this is very important to all of us. It's because we are a teaching education institution, and then one of the skill that our future teachers should learn is about thinking about their own action research in their own classroom. It's because we will try to help our future students also on teaching them how to do reflective teaching, because as Hannah mentioned, that this is not only on improving our practice, it is also for informing us on the important things that we need to do as we grow professionally, professional teachers. So
Yes.
thank you, Hannah, for the information, and I encourage our colleague to let's talk about this. Let's ask question, and how do we do action research in our college, and how do we also train the skill of doing action research and also teach our future teachers on this skill. Thank you. So
Yes, I think you are in a very good position. So in the sense that there is a team, it's a team effort, and there is also a support from the management level for this action research. So it's really really important, and your approach is so strategic and strong that I believe it will be very successful. All the elements of success are in place. So,
yeah, it involves a people that risking together on how do we start on this. Yeah.
yes, yeah, and it's a very good position to be. Support from colleagues and thinking about this together. There is actually a question in the chat. There is a question: is there a tendency for the researcher to be over-involved to the extent that personal biases in the analysis of the findings? I'm so glad about this question. Thank you for Odessa Averila for addressing this question. Is uh, this is a very good example of how the academic research tradition is different from action research approach, because this is a worry that we think about a lot when we are doing research. Like, we don't want to the personal bias to influence the analysis of findings. However, in action research, this is not a concern, because we are not aiming at objective and generalizable knowledge. We are aiming at improving our own course. So I don't think that that the personal bias will be mixing this up, because your personal bias would be to improve your course. so it doesn't really matter. But what I do see as a challenge is that we sometimes, I don't know about you, but I have come up with this problem before. When we collect data from our students and we don't like it, if the students are if the data shows that the students are not happy, or that something is not working, sometimes the personal bias would be to think that the students are wrong. I am the teacher. I know the students are wrong. They are just not committed. Or so this is a threat that we should trust the input that comes from the students and have a sort of humble attitude that maybe, yes, I am the expert, I am the teacher, but now something that I have done is not coming across for the students, so they are not there is a disconnection here. So this is something that sometimes happens, that we don't like the data that comes from the students, and then we try to sort of explain it in a way that we sort of explain it away. So, I don't know if this ever happens to you, but sometimes this can happen. But thank you very much for the question. It's a very good question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hannah. Ma'am Odessa, you have something to add? Ma'am Odessa is opening her camera, so probably Ma'am Odessa has something to add. Go ahead, Ma'am Odessa.
Hi, Miss Hannah. Hello. Hi, Sir Janelle. Thank you for that very like a reflective answer. Yeah, I agree with you, Ma'am Hannah, that sometimes there's personal biases will happen, especially if there are negative feedbacks from the students. But then we have to go back to our purpose, why we do this action research. So uh, it will really happen sometimes. I agree with that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the reflection.
You're welcome.
All right, so that was Ma'am Odessa, and thank you, Ma'am, for sharing your thoughts. Ma'am Hannah, I would like to raise a clarification of sorts. You made mention on the action research cycle where we plan, act, observe, reflect. You made mention that we can start practically anywhere on that four steps. However, it would be better if we can plan it very clearly for the action research. Would it still be acceptable if, in any case, for example, I was able to somehow, although not systemically, is that right? Systemically, yeah. I did not plan it very well. However, I implemented, for example, certain actions to address a few concerns based, for example, on my hunch or something like that, can that particular action be still salvaged in a way that I can still reflect and gather good research, good data from that, so that I can be able to improve my practice? So that's my question.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. That's actually a good example of how it is possible to start the cycle from any point. It has happened to me personally, that I have been already teaching. My course is already happening, and I already have something there, something new, and then I get the idea. Oh, maybe I should collect data on this. It has happened to me, yes. and, and uh, but then I would advise to continue for another cycle, so that at least one planning stage is included. But yes, yeah, because uh, sometimes you get the idea when you are reflecting on something that is already happening. Yeah, good
Thank you
point.
so much, Dr. Hannah. Yeah, that's actually the experience right now. Now that we are actually asking to plan for doing action research, and well, I already implemented something. However, I did not plan it very meticulously or something like that. So
Yeah,
that's very helpful, Dr. Hannah.
yeah, no, go ahead, collect data and see how it goes. And yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. Any more questions from our colleagues present here? I'm checking our YouTube live, and no questions are popping up on the comment section.
I am also happy to take questions via email if anything comes up afterwards. So
All right. How about from our trained participants or members of the team of that action research group? All right. So if there are no more questions, let me ask. Okay. We have from Ma'am Riza. Ma'am Riza, you are recognized. You can unmute yourself and show your video so that you can talk to Dr. Hannah. Ma'am Riz.
Hello, good afternoon, Ma'am Hannah. Um, I was so amazed with the presentation that you have shown to us. Then sorry, I work I work in a team that deals about the implementation of practice teaching. So with this time of pandemic, we really have a hard time how to deploy our students, and are they okay? Are they prepared? Because in our previous courses, like they're more on face to face, and for example, we are talking about teaching strategies. Now it's a different way. So at the end of the course last semester, we asked them to have a digital portfolio where they can make a lot of reflections for based on the Philippine standards for professional teachers and their domains. Now, the point here is we have a lot of data in hand, but with your presentation on that iterative cycle, we don't know where to start. We have a hard time thinking where we'd start, reflect on from those data. So we don't know really what to start. We start with this voluminous data that we have in hand. Thank you.
yeah, so you already have a lot of data from their
Portfolio.
uh, portfolio. Yeah, maybe analyzing the portfolio data is a good place to start, to see if there is anything that comes up from the portfolios that would then become a sort of a question for a further action research cycle. Maybe maybe that would be helpful. Um, that's probably what I would do personally, to see what comes from their reflections, if there is anything that you that is raising any questions or concerns, or any gaps that need to be addressed. Not sure if this is answering your question at all.
It's okay. I mean, I got your point. With the data at hand, because when we do practice teaching with the students, at the start really didn't know the direction. Now we ask them to do some reflections, and then if I'm going to juxtapose that with what you have presented about the cycle, so where would I start? With a plan, or where? That's what makes it difficult.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. So may perhaps start with the reflection or the observation, because you already have data that you can use. You already have those portfolios. So maybe start from there, and use that to see if there is anything in the portfolios, anything in their reflections that then gives motivation for a new research question, or anything like that. But definitely use what you have.
Thank you, Dr. Hannah. Thank you for the
Thank you for the
enlightenment.
question.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Reyes, for raising the question. Indeed, having the practice teaching implemented this semester is really a challenge. And I've even heard from other colleges here in our locality that they actually deploy their students really to the schools, in the public schools, and become a sort of teaching assistants to the teachers there. So I don't know if you've heard of that, ma'am. So probably it can also be of an input for us as we reflect on practice teaching. Thank you so much, Dr. Riza, for raising that question. All right. I think we can cater one last more question, if there are any. How about from our YouTube live? Do we have any questions from the YouTube live? Uh, Based on the YouTube live, wala pa namang question. All right. There are no questions in the YouTube live. All right. So, okay, final call for questions. It's like boarding an airplane. Final call for Mr. So and so. Anyway, so with that being said, kung wala na talagang question, if there are no more questions, of course, we can always reach Dr. Hannah through her email. So for those who are interested to contact Dr. Hannah, please do not hesitate to contact us. Para naman, we can give you the necessary details so that you can consult with her with your questions, especially on the action research. And I will personally be contacting Dr. Hannah for that purpose. And thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon's webinar. And I hope that you learned a lot in our discussion this afternoon. Before anything else, may I ask our Google Meet participants to open their cameras, and let's together say thank you to Dr. Hannah for really gracing us with her time, and let's give her a round of applause virtually. Maraming salamat po, Dr. Hannah, for sharing your expertise with us. Ayan. All right, so it's good to see everyone in your respective offices. Ayan. So maraming salamat po for joining us this afternoon. And so before we end, a few announcements. May I call in Ma'am Roxanne if meron tayong announcement on your end, ma'am? I think Dr. Roxanne is Okay. So my announcement, I have one announcement for everyone. Dr. Hannah's visiting professorship will have, Dr. Hannah will have her last session with us next week, March. Is that correct, Dr. Hannah? Okay. Of which the date will be confirming, and we will be consulting about our implementation of the inflex modality or the innovative and flexible learning modality. So I think that would be a very, very, very good session to conclude the visiting professorship of Dr. Hannah for DTTE, and it's an opportunity. No, it's an opportunity for us to actually get more intimate on reflecting to our practice, since now that we are on our second week of the term. So I think there will be a more meaningful exchange of ideas and experiences by them. So before I end, I would like to ask all the training participants to please access the evaluation link for your certificate of attendance, of which it's already shared in our Google chat and the YouTube live uh, comment section as well. So I'm seeing a lot of thank you messages from our YouTube live. And indeed, we are very thankful for the presence of Dr. Hannah this afternoon. Again, for comments and queries, please do not hesitate to contact us in any of our communication channels for said faculty peer facilitators and for all of us, teaching staff of the college. And finally, I would like to thank the DTTE for hosting the visiting professorship. Our department chair for DTTE is present today. Ma'am, thank you very much for this opportunity of allowing us to have this engagement with a very esteemed expert, Dr. Hannah. And again, kung wala nang pahabol, if we don't have any more comments and questions, this is the end. We are now in the end of our webinar session. Thank you very much. And this is Janil, your facilitator. May we have a good week ahead of us all. Thank you so much.